Hi there from Chicago. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Rally Halls. Mike Hall and Anthony Herron here. You want to make your claim to the country that Googling's not a word?
Well, I mean, they've tried to make it into a verb.
It has become a verb.
But it's not accurate, though. Not an accurate one. We should have standards in this country. That's what I always say. Let's have standards. That's all I ask for. It's not much.
Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports joins us. You're the deciding vote, Ross. Verb or not a verb?
You're web searching. That's what you're doing. You're not Googling.
I'm not getting involved in this argument. No. Don't drag me into this. Don't drag me into this.
What a politician. All right, straight to the big story.
I am in D.C. after all, right?
That's exactly right.
Right.
It's an election year. It makes sense.
There you go.
Straight to our big story of the day, which is the changes at the QB spot in the Big Ten. Starting off with Michigan, it was a QB battle all summer long there to replace J.J. McCarthy. Most expected Alex Orji to win the job, but when game one started, Orji didn't. Davis Warren got the nod. The past week, he threw a pick in each of the first 3 quarters played, so now he's out. Orji is in. Here's Sharon Moore.
Alex will start on Saturday. Excited for him. He's been in here chomping at the bit, so we'll move on from there. We're going to feel confident. We're going to put all we can into whoever's the quarterback, regardless of who it is. So that's going to be our guy, and that's who we're going to ride with. Just take the reins, perform like he did in the first couple weeks of camp. Like I said, thought he was in a really good place, and Davis outperformed him in camp at the end, and would love to see him just take the reins and do what he's been doing, through those first couple weeks, and I think he will. He's had a great couple weeks of practice. So has Davis, but obviously got to perform in the game. And excited to see what Alex is going to do. And he's been in here studying his tail off the past couple days, like he always is. But you can see it ramped up even more.
It's obviously been the huge storyline for the defending national champions. They have not been able to come close to replacing J.J. McCarthy. But, Ross, it's worth reminding everyone, when this started week one and Davis Warren was the starter, most everybody was surprised by that. Most everyone thought it would be Orji.
Shocked. Yeah, absolutely. It surprised everybody. I think college athletic in the college athletics world, the football world, that they picked Davis Warren, and now we see we're going back, right? We're flipping to who was originally the favorite in this competition, and you ask why, right? Why we're going back now? Turnovers. Every coach's worst nightmare, right, Anthony, is the turnovers. And you see 6 interceptions from Warren, 2 touchdowns, just cannot have it, right? The issue with Orji is that you don't have maybe the interceptions you see on the stat line, but you don't have much of a stat line at all, right? He's thrown 6 passes in his all season long. And so he's actually run, right, in his career. If you look, Alex Orji's ran more, 30 rushes than he's thrown passes, which are 7 overall passes. So we don't know a lot about him, but I guess we're going to find out soon enough with USC coming to town.
You're talking about coaching staffs, Ross, and I got to tell you, having that level of athleticism at quarterback, and especially on a consistent basis, is the type of thing that can keep coaches up at night, up all night perhaps, where you're trying to make sure that you have every front covered, every gap sound, because they can threaten you in a variety of ways. When you think about Alex Orji and Donovan Edwards being in the backfield together. And I believe that for Michigan as an offense, they need to transition the playbook to suit the skill set of Alex Orji as a quarterback. Davis Warren and him winning the starting job in camp, the offense was running a certain way that made sense to try and suit Davis Warren. But now, if this decision has been made by Sharon Moore, then the decision also needs to be made to put his quarterback in the best position for success. And so if you didn't want to go a bunch of read option early on, I get it. But that seems to be, at this point in his development, what Alex Orji is best at. So maybe it won't provide all the accuracy, all the efficiency that you hope for as a QB, but the playmaking is what's necessary. The playmaking is what's been lacking so far from Michigan's offense this season. Put that offense, put that athlete in a position to be at his best as a playmaker. Call him into movement, call him into runs, threaten the defense both with the longitude and the latitude. And if you get a playmaker behind center, everything else can coalesce around Alex Orji. He seems to have that potential. He's been in the system for a couple of years at this point. So I believe the offense should transition to what suits him best.
Real quick follow-up. How much of this is the fact that Warren just hasn't passed effectively and gotten enough yards? And how much of it is, to Ross's point, They had 8 turnovers all of last year, and they already have 7 this year.
I think that's a huge part of it because Davis Warren rightfully won the job in camp by outperforming Alex Orji, and then he's in game not protecting the football. That is such a huge deal for the Wolverines when you have a quarterback who's giving it to the other team. The defense isn't as elite as we've seen, at least so far this season, not as elite as we've seen in recent years when they're winning championships. So it feels like it's a combination of not only Alex Orji perhaps ascending a little bit, but yes, Davis Warren's performance has warranted them making this decision. And reports we're hearing out of Ann Arbor, Jack Tuttle, who is extremely experienced. I mean, I was calling games where Jack Tuttle was the backup at Utah years ago. So he's a very experienced backup QB who's just had trouble staying healthy, but apparently he's on the come as well.
Yeah, he was back ready to roll in the game this past week. But to the overall point, 153 passing yards per game for Michigan. That is worst in the Big Ten, an expanded 18-team Big Ten, so that's why they're having a big change. Change is also happening over in Madison, where it was not a very good weekend for the Wisconsin Badgers at all, as they went down to Alabama in a game that was not very close, but there's a big different reason why they're making a change at QB. It's for injury. Tyler Van Dyke officially has a torn ACL in his right knee. He's out for the rest of the season. That means former Mississippi State transfer Braden Locke will start. Similar situation as last year when he was the number 2 guy behind Tanner Mordecai. Mordecai got hurt, so Locke ended up getting starts last year. Ross, how does this change what the offense can be and will be for the rest of the season up in Madison?
Yeah, it should be interesting to see. Wisconsin's offense has certainly struggled thus far in the year, but what a tough way. Third game of the year, for first year at the school for Tyler Van Dyke to go out. There was a lot of hype and expectations around him coming in from Miami, and you got Alabama came to town, big win at your place, and then you lose your starting quarterback. It's really tough. And then we've seen, like I mentioned earlier, we have seen the Badgers offense just not hum like everybody kind of thought it would. And now with the quarterback out, you got Braden Locke coming back. As you mentioned, he had some experience, right? He started, I think, 3 games last year as a freshman, filled in for injury, played in 5 games. And he did push Van Dyke during, competition over the summer and in fall camp. But Locke might be most famous for his high school teammate, Jackson Smith in Jigba. Unfortunately for him, there's no Jackson Smith in Jigba at Wisconsin.
And, that's kind of that combination, right? Because the offensive line coming into this season, the offensive line in the run game was viewed as what would need to really press this offense forward. And it seemed to be the approach that Luke Fickell was going to prefer taking, and they just haven't gotten to that point. So now you have your backup QB in as well, and you really feel for Tyler Van Dyke because he's a guy who had waited for this opportunity, had some ups and downs in his Miami career, and was now going to be thrust into the starting lineup. And yes, he didn't even finish the first series against Alabama, but he was looking really good.
That first drive was great.
I mean, hadn't missed a pass. The team was rolling, and Camp Randall was rocking. It seemed like they maybe had the tide on the ropes, and he goes down with an injury. You see the emotion all over his face. But now this does open an opportunity for Braden Locke. And similar to the conversation I was having about Michigan's offense, where the skill set perhaps between Van Dyke and Locke, not quite as dissimilar between Warren and Orji, but Braden Locke has even said he does like going up tempo. He does like the no huddle. That seems to suit him best. And there's a little bit of opportunity. There's some space and time for the Badgers to consider transitioning their offense a little bit. Phil Longo was going with more tempo last season early on, and because the offense was so inconsistent and the defense was struggling, they went away from that during the year last year. Maybe this is an opportunity as they prepare to face the Trojans 2 weeks from now to perhaps transition back to a little bit more tempo. Look, you can still use the multi-tight end sets. You can still call some run plays. But if it gets your QB into a rhythm, maybe it's not the consistently sort of full game type of tempo, but find those moments to get your QB into some rhythm. When they sprinkled it in the other day, Braden Locke seemed to like it.
So to be clear, in both these first 2 instances, Michigan and Wisconsin, you think for success to happen and happen fairly quickly, the staff has to change a bit of what the offense is to cater towards the skill set of the QB.
Very much so. And it's not always an easy thing to do for an offensive play caller because you've been looking to install a system. You've been looking to have your program find an identity on offense. And we know exactly what the identity for Michigan football has been. It's been a tailback-centric run game. Now maybe they have to transition to a QB-centric run game. From Wisconsin's perspective, I called it last season a crisis of concept, because it did seem that schematically they weren't completely sure in that first season in Madison what they wanted to be, what suited their personnel best. And now here I am saying maybe they transition again. So I do find it to be a difficult decision for Luke Fickell and Phil Longo, because what they're doing so far, it's just not working that well. It's very inconsistent on offense. Do you lean into that? Do you hope for development on the O-line and the running back-centered run game? Or do at least sprinkling in some tempo, does that allow you on offense to find more big plays, find more chunk plays? And then it's up to Braden Locke when that opportunity is there. If tempo keeps the opposing defense off balance, doesn't allow them to change personnel quite as much, now he has got to seize the opportunity. When a play is there to be made, he's got to go snatch that jugular, even when you're not necessarily as efficient at all times. But if you're going to be that quarterback who's there that sort of rallies the troops, even though you're the backup, he's been in this system longer than Tyler Van Dyke was,
right.
And apparently it was a camp battle that played out in a pretty close manner. So he's got some arm talent. They've got to find a way to get him in the best and most comfortable position possible.
Mentioned Michigan was last in the Big Ten passing yards per game. Wisconsin is 16th out of 18 in that statistic. Different situation for our third team that's making a QB change. That's what's happening up in Evanston. They already made the change, and it worked out. Jack Lausch replaced Mike Wright, and for sure he had a slow start. Only 2 of 10 passing to begin the game, but then he ended really strong, completing 18 of his final 21 attempts. Also proved he can run the ball. So far, Ross, so good for the new QB wearing purple.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. You mentioned it there about the he adds a different dynamic, obviously, right? He adds the running game with his feet, which can open up, right? Can open up the offense a little more. I think he had over like 60 yards, I believe, rushing in that game, and kind of finally got going, right? Got into a rhythm in the second half. Really struggled in the first half. I think Northwestern only led, I think, by a touchdown there, and finally got going in the second half. And we'll obviously he'll get a stiffer test, right? An angry Washington team in Seattle, but it's a great story. You know, this is a Chicago kid, Lausch, kind of swooping in and hoping to spark the offense, and we saw a little bit of that in the second half.
Even though Mike Wright was bringing his experience in the transfer portal, Ross, I was kind of thinking maybe Jack Lausch would be able to win that camp battle, because even going back to last season, being around David Braun, interacting with he and his staff, they were excited about Jack Lausch back then. I mean, they just liked the multidimensional skills that he would bring to the table, not only as a passer, but as a runner as well. And we did see, after he kind of got cooking a little bit the other night, that he was able to bring both those skills to the fore. And so at least you do have 2 quarterbacks now that you can look at and say that they have experience. But, you know, by comparison, when Jack Lausch got into the game the other night, sure, it was against Eastern Illinois, but you did see the offense begin to flourish. And it wasn't just about him, but it did seem like the rest of the team. Once you had a quarterback that was putting that type of pressure on the defense, then safeties are dropping down into the box a little bit more, run lanes open up, throwing windows broaden a little bit. And when you have a QB who can put that pressure on the defense, then it does allow more playmaking opportunities for the team around him. And so for Jack Lausch, just continue to stay calm and composed as he looked in the second half the other night, because I do believe he's got the full support of David Braun. He's been talking for a while now about how dynamic a playmaker he believes Jack Lausch can be.
For sure, the defense that Northwestern and Lausch are going to face is getting harder than it was this past week with Eastern Illinois. Their next 3 games on the road against Washington, against an undefeated Indiana, and on the road against Maryland. Which is the quarterback in charge of Indiana, Kurtis Rourke, who's joining us from our Bloomington studios. Kurtis, how do you describe what the start to this season has been like for you guys?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, it's a surprise, I think, outside of the locker room. But internally, we've really bought in since January, since a lot of us got here. A lot of us transferred in, all had the same type of goal of to win and to put our best foot forward every single week. And so I feel like inside the locker room, you know, we're expected to go out and compete and to put up big numbers and come away with a win. And that ultimately starts up top with Coach Signetti.
So let's talk about him then. What do you remember about the very first time you ever met your head coach?
Yeah, I met him on a FaceTime call. I was in the portal, and he called me from his house back when he was still living near James Madison. He called me, and he was awesome. I mean, it was really just everything that the media has seen. He's confident. You know, he laid out his blueprint for this year, and he said, "I really believe that you can be a big part of this team, and we're going to win." And it would be, pieces would fall together if you could come and help us win these games. But he was very much confident who he was, rightfully so. Told me his resume. I kind of bought in right away.
So I want to follow up on that, because obviously that's the word that is best used to describe him, is confident. Give me your best example, your best story of how your head coach seems to be overflowing with confidence.
Yeah, I mean, he's confident, but he's got the stats to back it up, and that's what he'll use. I mean, on that call, when I first talked to him, he listed off his stats, listed off the programs that he's been able to turn around, and kind of just gave the cold hard facts and stuff. And so it was really just impressive to see, what he's done in all different types of program, and knowing that he's had that history and he could do it again. And so yeah, it was amazing to hear his stats, knowing that it's true, even though they're quite impressive.
Yeah, yet to have a losing season his entire head coaching career. It sure is impressive. We only know him from the distance or from interviews we get here and there, but you know him on a personal level. What is he like in a locker room? Pregame, halftime, postgame? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely got a lot of passion for the game. He knows how to motivate. One of the best pregame, halftime speeches that I've heard comes every single week from him. He knows how to get the team fired up. But yeah, he's all about business. And until we walk off the field with a win, he's never satisfied. He's always looking to continue to get better, improve, and instill all of those values in us. And you hear that every single game.
I'm not surprised you say he's great at giving speeches and that it's motivational, but give me an example. Like, how so?
I don't even know, because I don't think I could come up with those speeches myself. He knows how to fire us up. He's every time we break out of the locker room, whether that's before a game or after halftime, energy's at the highest, and we're ready to go out and dominate. That's all I can really say. I don't know how he comes up with it, but it works.
What don't people know about him?
I think that, like I mentioned, he's just so passionate about the game of football.
I think we know that, Kurtis. That's pretty clear. Yeah. And I would also say that he's kind of just, he is what is advertised. He's literally one of the most hardworking coaches I know. He watches film as much as anybody, and I think that kind of shows us how much he cares, even outside of what he says. He backs it up with his actions. It helps us, and it's helped us since January, when a lot of guys, trying to figure out who he was as a coach, found out that, he's serious, and kind of helped us, follow that trend of working extra hard, not just doing the bare minimum. And it's been successful so far. Let me ask you about last week, going across the country, playing the first ever Big Ten game for UCLA, playing in the most famous college football arena. What was it like? What was the energy like in that building?
It was awesome. I mean, the Rose Bowl is what a historic place to be at, to play in. I mean, just in the locker rooms, you could see of all the different types of events in games that have played or been there, going back to the 1920s and all that. And so I just think being able to be at a place like that and compete and play in front of an amazing crowd. Indiana faithful traveled really, really well, which is amazing to see. And just being able to go out and compete in such a historic place, it was awesome. Meant a ton, and definitely be memorable.
Your offense has been fantastic, but your defense is no slouch either. When you go up against your own Indiana defense in practice, what impresses you about them?
I just think that they show so many different things on defense. Being in spring ball and in fall camp, it really tested us as an offense. You needed to have really good eyes because they could get to so many different looks and so many different ways. And so being able to go against that every single day, truly I think we played one of the best defenses in the country every single day. That helped me especially, but I know the rest of the offense as well. Because they're so talented, and being able to have those different looks just makes it even harder.
You're a Canadian from Ontario. Tell me the thing that people most often screw up about Canada.
I would say that it's no matter where you are, and no matter what time of year, it's always cold there. At least where I grew up, it was pretty similar weather to the Midwest, but the stereotypes of it being cold all the time is really when you travel way up north, and that's when it gets pretty cold. So
yeah, you have summer up in Canada, people.
We do exactly. That's what I'm saying. We have those hot days, and you're not wearing jackets and all that. It's not always cold. So
I know this past year you did something that's pretty unique for a college football player. You got married. What's it like being married and still on a college football team?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Caroline is my biggest fan. She's a love of my life, and I'm just blessed to be able to spend every day with her and be able to come home every night to such an amazing person. It makes those hard days and those good days even better, knowing that you have someone like her just in my life every day.
Be honest. How's Caroline's spiral?
Yeah, it's not. She specialized in volleyball. She was a D1 athlete at Ohio, and so she's got the overhead strength for sure, and so she can get there. But we're still working on the spiral. But she's got more power than me sometimes. So.
I don't doubt that at all. Where do you think you've grown the most as a quarterback?
I think one of the biggest things since I got here was getting with Coach Tino and really focusing on my eye discipline, being able to recognize the defense on all plays, no matter run or pass, and be able to dissect and kind of understand why I'm going to a side with the ball, not just because he's open, but being able to anticipate and then come follow through with that. Coach Tino's been awesome. Great to learn from him, and it's been really helpful, and I felt like it's really elevated my game, especially this year.
Kurtis, congratulations on this awesome start to the season there in Bloomington. Best of luck the rest of the way, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Here's what I love about DiNardo and Urban. If you would have told me, watch the Nebraska game, pick a play you think they'll break down, I wouldn't have said a second down 1 yard gain. But they did it, Ross, because of the big picture point of that now means Illinois has to be ready for packages like that in a short week with a game on Friday. It could be a really smart move.
That's right. We heard some clips from Matt Rule, the Nebraska coach, discussing that it's okay if these plays don't necessarily work, quote unquote, right? They are there in part to give the defense something else to think about, right? To keep them busy during the game, but of course in preparation and taking up time in practice. And I think at one point, we may have shown it there, but Harburg had 3 consecutive plays where he got the ball. Those Nebraska fans went crazy, right? He caught a pass. He ran for a first down while lined up at running back. And then he lined up at the Wildcat quarterback where we've seen him kind of in the past, and he darted for a yard or two. It's all these packages are really fun, right? It's fun for fans. It's fun for coaches and players. But as I mentioned earlier, the important part is that defenses have to now plan for this on tape, and that takes up more time.
Memorial Stadium is just kind of a special place for football in general, and Nebraska fans, they get it. They understand the game. They appreciate the game. And what they're in the midst of right now with the way that the team and Heinrich Harburg being such a great example of them putting the we over the me, and what that can be for a football team that's been in the midst of trying to build something for a few seasons, even going back to the previous regime. And now in year 2 with Matt Rule, you have this combination of talent. And yes, Nebraska is a truly talented roster. You know, they're not just this little engine that could. They've got real athletes on the field, high-level recruits out there, and now they've got a coaching staff in place who's maximizing what they can bring to the table. And Heinrich Harburg is a great example of that, where another quarterback comes in, beats him out for the starting QB job, but he doesn't sulk about it. He's able to still use all those skills that come to the table. And now on a short week, Aaron Henry and that Illini defensive staff, they have to figure out how will he be utilized, how much time they should dedicate to making sure they're prepared for Heinrich Harburg to be on the field. It may be 5 snaps, it may be 15 snaps, but whatever it is, it's going to be unique versus what they're running when he's not in the lineup.
In a similar way, there was a twist in Iowa about how they used their quarterbacks. Brendan Sullivan is the backup. He was not able to beat out Cade McNamara to be the starter, but they used him in red zone situations. What did you see there?
I saw fun. I saw that being a good time, and I used the term unique. Just in talking about the way that Heinrich Harburg enhances the creativity that's available to Nebraska. And Tim Lester can have some creativity with what he can do with Iowa's offense when Brendan Sullivan comes in there behind center as well. And we didn't see as many plays for an extended period of time there at Kinnick the other day, but some of those same opportunities, those possibilities will be there for Brendan Sullivan. He's a big guy. He's an athletic guy. When he was at Northwestern, he was known as the most dual threat quarterbacks that they had available to them in Iowa City, because he's had so much time on the football field and had opportunities to start games. He's got that experience coming into it, and there's no illusions at this time about who the starter is in Iowa City. But when you have that, especially in the red zone where Iowa had a few fits and starts in the red zone over the last couple of games, now you do have this enhancement to Iowa's offense, and you couple that with the way Caleb Johnson has been running the football, the experience of their offensive line, the way they're starting to roll folks off the ball. Now you do have some versatility that, Ross, I believe in Iowa City wasn't available to them before. And for an Iowa offense that struggled a lot, and it's been a storyline or two in recent years, now you do have this extra wrinkle that should enhance what they can do.
Yeah, I need Jerry and Herb to break down this play. It's a ton of fun. A little triple option, got a man in motion. He ended up doing that. He ended up getting the pitch guy out there and flipping it to him for a forward pass before he broke the line of scrimmage. That was fun. And like you said, I think that's the most important part here is, look, Iowa has struggled, as we all know, to pass the ball. And when you get closer and closer to that red zone and your options are limited, you want to come out with a few different wrinkles, right? And I think Kirk Ferentz is doing that. Tim Lester is doing that with this. But another thing they're doing is what Matt Rule is doing, right? Making sure that defenses use prep time to study things like this.
Yeah, and it's interesting that their offense, we're only a couple games in, but still, Iowa had, what was it, the 20 offensive touchdowns all of last year, and they've already got 11 through 3 games this year. So, again, we've seen some signs of a spark in that Iowa offense and the wrinkle that Sullivan brings. Here's a look at the updated Big Ten conference standings, and only 4 teams have played a conference game thus far, and not everybody has played 3 games thus far. But with that in mind, those teams that have played 3 games have now played a fourth of their schedule overall on the year. So I want you guys to each pick a handful of teams and tell me the grade that you have for them at this point in the season. Ross, we're going to start with you, and we're going to start with Nebraska.
Yeah, the Huskers, A+. This was my sleeper to contend for the Big Ten title this year. Matt Rule has been good in his second year. If you look back at the history of where he's been, and the Huskers are well on the way, right? 3-0 into the top 25. They've had stellar quarterback play from a true freshman, but really one of the more overshadowed things has been the defense. Matt Rule made maybe one of the best hires a couple years ago with Tony White from Syracuse coming over, defensive coordinator. His defense has allowed 2 touchdowns in 3 games. They've been, but they rarely have broken. And that includes a game, of course, against Colorado, who we all know has incredible explosive guys like Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. So they have been good for an A+ in my book.
So as an unbiased, highly respected member of the media, you go with the team that you chose big things for in the preseason as your A+, Ross. I respect that.
That's right.
I'm going with the
pat on
team.
the back.
I had very limited expectations for the Indiana Hoosiers. That's despite all of the bravado, all the swag, all the very sort of Coach Prime mantra, essentially, that Curt Cignetti brought into Bloomington with him. I still didn't expect this, man, from Indiana. So I got an A+ as well. It goes to the guys in Bloomington. The Hoosiers have been beyond anything I could have expected, anything that most folks expected through 3 games this year. Yes, the competition will continue to ramp up for Indiana, but it has ramped up every week essentially so far this season. They're 1-0 in the Big Ten. They did so on the road. Were able to control the majority of the action at the Rose Bowl. It's been the passing attack. It's been the spread look. They've been able to run the ball effectively as well. And their defense has been playmaking also. So everything that you could hope for from Indiana, they've been able to accomplish at a high level. And everything that Curt Cignetti said he was going to do, so far he's been getting it done.
I think those are almost universally agreed upon A+. What those 2 programs have done the first 3 games, that makes a ton of sense. However, you can have a great start to the year without getting an A+.
True.
With that in mind, Ross, what grade do you give to the Fighting Illini at this point?
Yeah, A- for the Fighting Illini. We saw the game against Kansas. Big win. Last year they went to Kansas. We remember got blown out and had kind of a disappointing year there with five wins. And this weekend, I think I'm more excited about any game this weekend than outside of Tennessee, Oklahoma on Saturday, maybe this one. Illinois at Nebraska, number 22 against number 24, and we'll be able to see a little more from the Illini, two of the best teams we've seen so far. Can they take it on the road and do it? Luke Altmaier, quarterback's been playing really well. Illinois is I think in the top 25 offensively in like the main stat categories: passing, rushing, 17th nationally in total yards. But hey, as I mentioned earlier, they'll meet a Nebraska team that's playing just about as good defense as anybody. So the test, that A-, we'll see if it can hold up on Friday night in Lincoln.
Yeah, they're going to have a tough task. There's no doubt about that, man. And that game, both teams play at Memorial Stadium. It's going to be at the one in Lincoln, but they've both been exceptional stories for the season so far. And I really think that the guys in East Lansing have been a great story as well. So for me, Michigan State, I see them so far this season as a B+. I'm grading them on a little bit of a curve because it's the first season for Jonathan Smith. And so for what he's begun to nourish, to nurture with the Spartans, this combination of youth and experience, some of it pre-existing before he got there, some of it that he's brought in via the transfer portal. There's a really intriguing combination of talent, and he's been able to get it to coalesce pretty quickly here with this 3-0 start, but there's still, no doubt, a lot of meat on the bone for Sparty to kind of figure out how can they continue to enhance what we've seen from them so far. You would imagine that young talent will continue to ascend throughout the season with that development arc that everyone sort of assumes, but it does strike me as a coaching staff that knows how to continue to get the best from those guys, will put that work in, continue to be a better team later in the season than what we've seen right now. And when you can throw the football with talent at quarterback and receiver that Michigan State has been able to provide so far, and the defense is taking the football away, Michigan State's going to be a really dangerous team. So that's a part of what really makes this start so impressive, because they're starting to feel it.
Hasn't been 12 consistent quarters of pretty football,
right,
but wins are wins, and they're 3-0 at this point, which cannot be said to the other team in that state. Ross, what's your grade for the defending national champions?
Yeah, Michigan, I got it a C+. Anthony, hey, this is a team that I before the season, this is my prediction, is the most disappointing team in the Big Ten.
Okay.
We're starting to get a trend here, aren't we? We're starting to see a trend. C+ for the Michigan Wolverines. Quarterback situation completely unstable right now. Obviously, making the switch, as we talked about earlier, to Alex Orji. Maybe that can light a spark there. But the situation certainly not great. Defense got exposed a little bit too against Texas. I mean, this is a front with a couple of NFL players on it, maybe more. And we saw the Longhorns run the ball consistently, block well. Thought Michigan would put up a little better job defensively, causing more pressure. We just didn't see that. And then, we saw against Arkansas State a 10-point win, some struggles at time. Obviously had to make the quarterback change. It's just been a really hard time offensively for Michigan. And when you see, USC coming in with D'Anton Lynn, a defensive coordinator, this remade type of defense, it's going to be tough to move the ball again.
I agree. Michigan is one of those squads this season, Ross, that a lot of us were kind of thinking maybe because of the pedigree that had been there for a few seasons that you'd continue to see that. It's still certainly a college football playoff possibility, but there's a lot of growth that's going to have to happen if Michigan's going to be one of those squads. Maryland is a team that I'm not sure I would necessarily call them a sleeper, but I've definitely been impressed with the Terps so far this year. They're a team that could be, you could even make the case, should be 3-0 right now. Some key penalties and some critical moments ended up being a part of what stopped them from winning that game against Michigan State. And so the Spartans were able to seize that opportunity, but then they respond by going on the road against an old ACC foe and being able to take down Virginia. So that was a really impressive performance, especially for the way they emerged in the second half on each side of the ball in that game. A big question was, where Talia Tagovailoa was the quarterback who'd led them to the last 3 bowl appearances, 3 bowl victories. He didn't play in the third one, but being that guy, sort of that fulcrum that everything's centered around with Maryland football since Michael Locksley's been there. And now Talia's gone, and Billy Edwards steps into that fold and continues to play at a really high level as a signal caller. They've still got an exceptional defense as well. So this is a Maryland team that, if they would have been able to pull out that Michigan game, the grade would even be much higher, but they didn't. So B-, it feels like this is a team to me that could end up with a much better grade by the end of the year.
To replace a man who, by most metrics, was the greatest quarterback in the history of that program, with Billy Edwards Jr., who's doing a really nice job. And you brought up their defense, 10 forced turnovers for the Terps. You know how many teams in the country have more?
I do not.
0. They're number 1 in the land right now in forcing turnovers. We're not. Conference announced the players of the week from this past week in football. Kurtis Rourke gets the offensive nod thanks to 307 pass yards and 4 TDs. Dante Trader Jr. had 11 tackles. That was a team high in the win on the road against Virginia. And Oregon and Minnesota picked up honors as well. Before we go, let's get a special shout out from the week 3 that was. Ross, who gets a shout out from you?
Shout out to the Ducks. We talked the first couple of weeks about Oregon's kind of lackluster type of performances in their first 2 games, just especially on the offensive line. Shuffled a lot of guys on the line, allowed a bunch of sacks to teams that, let's just say, probably aren't as strong as some of the others in the Big Ten that they'll face later. So there was real kind of concern, right, for them. Well, boom. They broke out against Oregon State, at Oregon State, so a rivalry game on the road, hit 49 points, finally saw an offense that really excelled. And how about Tez, just specific shout out, Tez Johnson at receiver. He's got almost 200 receiving yards now on the season, had a 110 and 7 catches at Oregon State. So maybe the Ducks are roaring to life.
My shout out is for Nick Marsh at Michigan State. After a huge effort the week before, the statistics didn't stand out to me in week 3, but just being a 17-year-old true freshman with such a load of that offense on his shoulders, got banged up in that game and still came back in for his team. I played as a 17-year-old true freshman. I was just a backup, and I was overwhelmed by that. He's really impressive.
My shout-out's going to go to Illinois wide receiver Pat Bryant. He's been playing great this year, had 7 catches, 102 yards in that last game. He's got 4 touchdown catches on the season. That leads the Big Ten, and that is all setting up for what is going to be an awesome Friday game.
Yeah.
Illinois and Nebraska, That is the first time the Illini have played in a ranked versus ranked matchup since 2008. How cool is that for that fan base?
Extremely cool. Haven't won one since, what, 2004, I think it's been, something like that. So, yeah, monumental game for each of those programs on a short week. Cannot wait to check that one out.
Friday night, 7 o'clock Central on Fox. You can watch that game. We'll continue to preview it throughout the week. For Ross and Anthony, I'm Mike. Thanks for watching this edition of Big Ten Today.